Why are the 39 Malachos that we refrain on Shabbat directly related to like this resting of Shabbat?
Yeah, so the question is, why are the definition of rest, why is that correlated to the Malachos of the Mishkan? Why would there be a connection in that way? That's a very good question, so let me answer it in two parts, really. The first part maybe you weren't even asking, but I'll mention anyway. What is the significance of the number 39? I'll give that as a little introduction. 39 is very significant, and again, I'm going to give you a little bit of a Kabbalistic answer. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world with 10 declarations. That's what Pirkei Avos says. God said this, God said this, God said this. And we believe that there are 4 worlds emanating from God. Each one is more spiritual till we finally have the concretization of the physicality here. They're called the world of Atzilus, which is the highest world of emanation. And then you have the world of Bria, the world of Yetzira, and then we have finally the physical, concrete world of the world of Asiya. Now, if each of these worlds is created by 10 mamoros, so 40 is the total of creation. The totality of creation is the number 40. That is why the Mabul was 40 days, because that kind of recreated the world. That is why Matan Torah was 40 days, because that too created a spiritual world for Hashem here. That is why a mikveh is 40 sah. We don't want you to be in a mikveh for 40 days. That would be a little difficult. So therefore we turn it into a volume measurement. 40 is connected to creation. Now, on Shabbos, I refrain from creation to acknowledge that God is the source of creation. But I, as a human being, can only emulate God in 39 of the 40 ways, because only God could create something from nothing. The Yesh Me'ayin, I don't have any connection to. So the 39 is the number of ways in the abstract I can imitate Hashem that I don't do on Shabbos. The 40th, which is the first, is Yesh Me'ayin, that Bichlal I have no shaychus. So that's the idea of 39. Now, what is the connection, though, between Mishkan activities and the like? So it's an interesting point that some suggest that it's kind of symmetrical. Because what did Hashem do on Shabbos? What did Hashem do in the 6 days of creation? He created a space for human beings to exist. On right? So he created a space for us, and he rested on Shabbos because he finished it. What is a Mishkan? We create a space for God, and on Shabbos, we stop doing that creation. So it's very, very symmetrical. God created the world to give us a space, and he stops doing that on Shabbos. We create a Mishkan to give Hashem a space. We stop doing that on Shabbos, right? So in a sense, we are the creators of space for God. I mean, that's Hashem's will. Just as God is the creator of space for us, and both of us rest on Shabbos. That's why you correlate the definition of malacha with what we do to create the space for Hashem. Okay, that's I wonder. Yeah.
What would be a good way if someone who's secular asks you, why can't a woman be a rabbi?
Yeah. So the question is, if somebody asks you, it doesn't have to be secular. A lot of Orthodox people are going to ask you as well. Why can't a woman be a rabbi? It really is a hard question. It is not the easiest question to answer, and who says a woman can't be a rabbi? Is that so obvious? Is that so pashut? So there are a few things. First of all, let's go through a list. Let's imagine you were writing a job description, right? Synagogues have to do this, right? You want to hire a rabbi, so you have to write a description. What do rabbis do? So you make a list of 20 things, 30 things, 100 things, whatever you want to do. Now, then ask yourself, how many of those things could a woman do? So, for example, it says the rabbi must counsel people. Well, a woman could counsel people. A rabbi must give classes. A woman could give classes, at least to other women. So, in truth, once you separate it out, there's quite a lot of things a woman can in fact do. So, what's the problem with the rabbi? So, a few things. First of all, imagine this. A woman can clearly not be counted for a minyan, that's for sure. So, can somebody be a rabbi of a shul if they can't even be counted for a minyan for the shul? That's kind of a strange situation. A woman cannot be a witness. That's a clear halacha. A woman cannot sign a ksuba. So in other words, you're having a rabbi who can't do, halachically, a number of things that a rabbi, that a normal Jew can do. So that's one issue. There's also an issue of tznius, in a woman kind of addressing men. Where is she going to stand? You have to have a mechitza. So she's going to give a drasha from the other side of the mechitza, right? How is it going to work? There is also an issue of, now people will argue with this, of men perhaps having improper thoughts as a woman is addressing them or leading them. Now, I'm going to admit that is not a fail-safe answer, because if you're worried about men having improper thoughts when a woman addresses them, what about women having improper thoughts when a man addresses them? Or what about the man having improper thoughts as he's addressing women, right? All of that can happen as well. But there might be more of an issue if the woman has kind of an open, obvious leadership role. So there are different types of reasons that you can give for it. But the one thing that's very, very interesting, if the core function of a Rav is to paskin halacha, here, there's absolutely no isser for a woman to paskin a halacha if she knows the halacha. That's very interesting. The core definition of a rabbi, again, I hope I don't get in trouble with this, but the core definition of a rabbi is not something that is taken away from a woman. A woman can be a posek in theory. In theory, if she properly learned, and there are learned women and the like. So could a woman be ordained as a rabbi? That's a little bit more of a question, because technically, smicha used to mean to be qualified to be a dayan, and a woman cannot be a dayan on a beis din. But a woman to paskin isra v'heter, paskin kashrus, paskin Shabbos, it's actually mutter. In fact, I hope this won't be the case, but many of you, well, you see, I mean, I hope you will, in fact, marry learned women, but I hope it won't be the case that you'll have to have your wife paskin for you. Sometimes that is the case, in which you have people who are learning in Kollel, and they know a lot of Gemara, but they don't know Hilchas Shabbos, they don't know Hilchas Kashrus. But their wife, who went to a good Beis Yaakov or a good seminary, knows all the halachas. So de facto, the wife is the posek of the house. In fact, my wife told me that when I was away in America a few years ago, so she was at someone's house for Shabbos, and they got into a discussion. There were guys from Brisk. And somebody brought up the idea, you guys never learn halacha. Again, I don't know if it's true or not. You guys never learn halacha, you just do lamdas. How are you going to paskin halacha? So they said, the Brisker guy said, our wife will tell us what the halacha is. We don't have to spend time. Even more advanced things. Chassidus, Rav Tzadok has a very deep sefer, Pri Tzaddik. It's on the Chumash and the like. So a person said, I can never learn Pri Tzaddik. It's so long, so many things. So I take my wife's copy. She checks off the ones that are good, the ones that are easy, or the ones that are accessible, right? So on one hand, that's a gavaldic thing. Baruch Hashem, that women are learned, but hopefully a man should at least be equal to his wife in his learning. So the funny thing about, going back to your question, the funny thing about a woman being a rabbi is that it's not the problem of paskening halacha. It's not the problem of being a posek. It's a problem of other things. She can't be counted for a minyan. She can't be kosher for an aid. There are problems of tznius in terms of speaking publicly, in terms of improper sexual thoughts that men might have. Now, these are kind of peripheral svaras, really. These are not ikr. Meaning, if you're asking me, what is the ikr thing that a woman cannot be a rabbi? The truth of the matter is, in many ways she could be, but there are side issues that would make it not a good thing. It wouldn't be a good thing. Now, finally, and some people say this is a real strong reason, although it's not really a reason. It says, if it hasn't been done in the history of Klal Yisrael, then it's not our business to make innovations because of political correctness. Meaning, even if I can't give you a good reason. Now, I know a non-religious person will hate that. I mean, that's saying you can never forget. So I know that's not really a reason you can give to somebody. But that's a very powerful reason, actually. And that is the notion of Masorah. That there is a tradition in how Klal Yisrael did things. And just because we think it makes sense on some level to change it, doesn't mean we have to jump on the bandwagon and change things, right? Now, as I say, I fully appreciate that these are not reasons that are going to convince anybody that doesn't already have that orientation, but there's a lot to it. Now, remember, let me remind you that although I said a woman cannot be a dayan on a beis din, that is a halacha, but if both balei din accept that a woman should be a dayan, according to many Rishonim, if both people agree, they can even have a woman to be a dayan on a beis din. And this is the raya from Devorah, right? Devorah was one of the great judges in Tanakh, and she used to judge under a palm tree, the Tomer Devorah. And Tosfos explains why under a palm tree, because she was worried about yichud. She didn't want to be in a house, so she only did her judicial business outside. And Tosfos asked the question, how could a woman be a dayan? A woman is not kosher to be a dayan on a beis din. And Tosfos answers, if both litigants accept it, it's going to be valid. So even the dayan, theoretically, could have that particular role. Yeah.
In the midbar, when Aaron was about to make the egel, he asked the men to bring their jewelry. Or to bring their wives' jewelry, but he also asked them to bring theirs too. Like, men wore jewelry, essentially,
Oh, yeah.
in the midbar.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a din about men not wearing beged isha, and I understand, like, even Rav Chaim talks about not even wearing a watch. So, like, where is the line drawn for men wearing jewelry, etc.? And also, as a sub-question, what exactly were the nose rings that the Torah talks about all the time?
Yeah. So you have to understand, the halachos about not wearing women's garments and men not wearing women's garments and women not wearing men's garments is kind of a circular idea, because what defines something as a man's garment or a woman's garment depends on what's being worn in society. In a sense, society changes the rules as time goes on. So when there was a tekufa, when there was a time, in other words, there's nothing objectively, feminine because it's jewelry. Men wore adornments. Women, if you're in Scotland and you wear a kilt, a kilt is a dress, right? That's not going to be called a beged isha in Scotland, because that's a common, let's say 100 years ago, it was pretty common. That's the way men dressed, right? Even pants for women. If you ask the question, why is it against halacha for a woman to wear pants? So a person might give the answer, because that's a male garment. That's actually not the reason. Pants are not a male garment, because men and women both, in general society, they both wear pants, and especially if women's pants are different style or a different cut. The problem with pants is not that it's male. The problem with pants is that it's form-fitting and accentuates the body. So that's the problem. The problem is a tznius problem. The problem is not begedish, and that's why if it's sweatpants or very loose, talk to your local Orthodox rabbi, but there may be a makom if someone is a physical therapist or a woman in a healthcare, a nurse. There may be heterim to wear very loose pants that don't accentuate the body. So mimela, there was a time in which men wore jewelry as well, right? I don't know the societal changes why men stopped wearing. Once they stop wearing, then you're not allowed to resume it, because of beged-ish or beged-isha. Nose ring, as far as I know, I don't have a lot of knowledge on it. A nose ring meant a nose ring. This is what they wore.
The one that goes like this, or the one like in your on the side?
No, I think it was at the bottom. There. But it's hard to know. We don't have pictures from the time. And again, some of the jewelry strikes us as odd. We wouldn't wear it today. Certainly, you're not going to go to yeshiva wearing all of these different things, and you would not marry a girl who wears them either. But still, if those were the MINHAGIM, then those were legitimate and the like. Rav Chaim's, you heard Rav Chaim Knesset or Rav Chaim Soloveitchik? Which Rav Chaim
Knesset.
Was against a watch? Rav Chaim doesn't wear a watch?
Like I heard that somewhere. So like.
Is that true? Everyone knows Rav Chaim doesn't wear a watch.
Take the watch off.
Okay, I don't wear a watch either, but not because I'm so firm. It's not for that reason. That's a very okay. That particular psak is a very difficult psak. That obviously we're not noeg that way. But as they say, generally speaking, jewelry per se that is shared by men and women are not considered beged isha in that way. Yeah.
I heard quote that if you commit one of the big three sins, your soul spiritually cut off from the nation. So I asked my Shurov if there's TESHUVA for such an act. He said the Rambam paskins that you can't do TESHUVA apparently, but there for such an act, I may be wrong, I don't know.
Okay.
But if there are other points giving a hold, yes, but it requires more extreme TESHUVA. So the first part of the question is why would the Rambam say this, and the second part is what is more extreme TESHUVA practice?
Okay, there's so much information there that I think is incorrect, that I'm very, very astounded. First of all, the Rambam says explicitly more than once. You're talking about the three AVEIRAs, the most chomer AVEIRAs, Avodah Zarah, Gili Arai, Shvichas Damim. The Rambam says for sure you can do tshuva. The Rambam says explicitly, even if a person was Oved Avodah Zarah his whole life, he can do tshuva the last second of his life, and his sin is going to be forgiven. So it's absolutely the case that you can do tshuva even for the Gimel Chamuros. The one exception might be murder. Murder might be extra difficult because murder you can't undo the damage. In other words, sins that I commit to God, God allows me to repair the damage. If I took a person's life, I can't repair it. But even then, that doesn't mean you can't do tshuva. That just means that you may have to have Gehenna, you may have to have suffering, and the like. So it's 100% true that all Rishonim, as far as I know, say that there is tshuva, but it is also the case that for certain very chomor aveiros, the tshuva is accompanied, or must be accompanied, by a certain measure of suffering in life. In other words, some aveiros, I just do tshuva and God forgives me. Other aveiros, I need tshuva plus what are called yisurin. Now, yisurin can take many forms. Yisurin can be light, or yisurin can be heavy. For example, if a person ordered a cup of coffee, and the coffee is cold, that's yisurin. That's a kapara on some level for chomer aveiros. If I put my hand in my pocket to take out a 5 shekel, and I take out a 2 shekel, that's yisurin. If I miss a bus, or I'm waiting for a bus, or I'm sitting on a bus, or standing on a bus, it's not comfortable, yisurin. So, and that's why we say in Yiddish, there's a saying, whenever something happens that's not so great, you say, let it be a kapara. On the other hand, there's also yisurin that is very devastating. Illness, sickness, death, bereavements, loss of people you love, loss of job. So yisurin can be small, yisurin can be big, but for the chomor aveiros, you need some measure of yisurin to cover your kapara. But as long as your tshuva is sincere, for sure, at the end of the day, Hashem is going to give you forgiveness. Okay, so I don't know where you got the information, but one should always know, Ein dover omeid b'fnei tshuva, there is nothing that blocks tshuva from working. Yeah.
How do you understand Ramesh's tshuva on homosexuality?
Yeah, which aspect?
He seems to be saying that that nobody actually has a taiva for homosexuality, and just to spite God.
Yeah, I have to look. I have to look at the lashon, and again, on shuvas like that, sometimes as the science gets more developed, as we understand things a little bit more, you do have to revisit it. In other words, you don't necessarily have to accept that, even from a gadol b'Torah, as a final word. On the other hand, I do want to say that the Gemara in Bava Basra says, "Chacham odif minavi." A wise person in Torah could be greater than a prophet. And strangely enough, some of what Rav Moshe said is more true today than it was when he wrote it. It was almost a nevuah. And Rav Moshe's point, basically, is at least in part, is that a lot of the taiva, a lot of the urge for homosexuality, or transgenderism, which is a different problem, but it's related, is really societally based. Society decides, we want to be able to do this. So they implant all sorts of desires and urges in people that were not in fact there. So maybe what Rav Moshe might be saying is, not so much the individual guy is a rebelliousness, but the fact that society pushes this, even when there's no pre-existing taiva, is an act of rebellion against God. And the truth is, maybe that was less known when he wrote it. But now I think we see this all the time. I can tell you the transgender issue. It's schrecklich. This is a tremendous indictment on the psychiatric community. Some girl wants to play baseball. So the psychiatrist will say, well, maybe we ought to consider transgender surgery because she wants to be a boy. And if the parents say, well, we would rather not do that, they say, oh, you're being, whatever the term is, not homophobic, but transgender phobic, whatever. You have binary thinking, like binary. You're old-fashioned, that people have to either be boys or girls. A modern person understands non-binary, right? And I'm telling you, they aggressively, it's amazing, they aggressively push this type of deviation even when there's no real desire to do so. So it could be that that's what Rav Moshe is, at least Merames to B'Nevuah almost in that way. Yeah.
I have a question from an alumnus. He says, can the Rav speak about why minhagim are so important, and should one be deterred from adopting minhagim from other communities if there are no halachic ramifications? He said, for example, a Sephardic having a bedekin at the wedding or reading the Rebbe's letter under the chuppah.
Yeah, so the question becomes, why are minhagim so significant? After all, a minhag by definition is not something you have to do or you're forbidden to do. A minhag by definition was not originally an obligation. So why do we consider it important? Why do we say you shouldn't change minhagim or you have to follow minhagim? And then the second question was, what about changing minhagim? Can I adopt minhagim from other congregations if they don't violate any halachic principle within my own tradition? So first of all, minhagim have a checkered history. On one hand, we do have this rule, minhag Yisrael Torah. Once it's a minhag of Yisrael, it's like Torah, right? So we have that idea of how important a minhag is. But then Rav Adya Yosef always likes to point out, it's an old word, that minhag has the same letters as Gehenim. Meaning too much minhag stuff, you'll wind up in Gehenim because you're going to break halachas. So we have a whole literature about good minhagim versus bad minhagim. Not all minhagim are the same. Some minhagim are considered to be holy and elevated. Some minhagim are considered to be superstitious or whatever it would be, and they should be destroyed. Was the minhag supported by a gadol, or was it just, without gadolim supporting it? But the basic idea of minhag, why are minhagim given any significance at all, is based on the idea that the Jewish people are God's nation, are God's people. We have all of Klal Yisrael as a special kesher to the Ribono Shel Olam. So if Klal Yisrael, or a segment of Klal Yisrael, is directed to serve Hashem in a certain way, we believe that there may be a certain Ruach HaKodesh that's pushing us in a certain direction, that this gives Hashem pleasure, even if it's not a chiyuv, even if it's not an obligation or an isser. It's like Hashem speaking through the collectivity of Am Yisrael. Now, this is not an easy question, because the question is, how small a unit can you have? I mean, okay, it's one thing to say Ashkenazim, Sephardim, those are big groups within Klal Yisrael. I mean, can we say, 138 Malot Daphna, we have a minhag, we do things this way. I mean, is that going to become halachically obligatory because 5 apartments or 20 apartments, do something? It's a hard question exactly. How small is the unit that we say the Ruach of Hashem is speaking? But that's a tremendous idea. A minhag is a way that we give something back to God, so to speak. We embellish a mitzvah. We beautify a mitzvah. We do something beyond what we have to do to show that we're machshav. One example is the minhag of making noise when Haman's name is Megillah, right? So everybody makes noise. That's a minhag. And there are people, even today, that don't like that minhag because it interrupts the Megillah, and sometimes you can't hear the Megillah, right? So even in the Ramah's time, people wanted to stop it. Keep the kids quiet. The Ramah says in Hilchos Purim, one should not be mezalzel, one should not denigrate any minhag of Klal Yisrael, that the minhagim come from a holy place, from a kadosh place, and therefore in this case it's a way that we vicariously eradicate Amalek in that symbolic way. But the main point is you got to be very careful that the minhag does not violate halacha. And sometimes a minhag might violate a halacha, and one has to be very careful in that way. Now, you then ask the question, if I'm Ashkenazi, let's say, and there's some beautiful Sephardic minhag I would like to have, or vice versa, Sephardi, and there's some beautiful Ashkenazic minhag I would like to have, is there any problem with my incorporating it as long as it doesn't violate my chiyuvim? So of course, for an Ashkenazi to have rice on Pesach would be osir. So you can't just say, I'd like to do that. But let's say whatever it would be, what was the example you gave? You gave an example. Yeah, Bedekin, different in Yonim like that. It's just an extra thing. So the truth of the matter is, I remember a story from the Brisker Rav that one of his sons, I don't know which one, married a woman from a Hasidic family. And Motzei Shabbos, she would do a special thing. She would light candles from the Havdalah candle. It's a minhag among Hasidim. It was not a minhag in Lita. So the Brisker Rav's son was a little upset that she's bringing in these Hasidic customs into the Litvisha home. So he went to his father, he complained, and the Brisker Rav says, what does it bother you? This is something that she enjoys doing. There's nothing wrong with it. So I don't know if that's a raya, but that's a shtickle. I mean, you can't bring rayas from stories, but that's a shtickle raya that you can incorporate beautiful minhagim that appeal to you. The only question about a badekin, I'll tell you what the problem with the badekin is. The problem with the badekin, though, is that since it's done publicly, so it seems that you're making it part of the wedding, meaning it's not stam a nice minhag like I light extra candles on Shabbos or whatever it is. So it could be that if the minhag of Sephardim is not to have, it could be it would be improper before Hesia to violate those minhagim. In an example would be yichud. There's another example. Many Sephardim do not have a yichud room after a chuppah. They consider nisuin to be the chassan bringing the kala to his actual home. So if a Sephardi who follows that psak were to have a yichud room, that might be a zilzal. That might be a denigration of the halachas of Sephardim. Yeah.
The Rav defined the term mature. I'm wondering if there's any issues, any Torah sources that talk about this word, and how important it is in Jewish life to be.
How important is?
In Jewish life,
Yep.
to be quote unquote mature.
Yeah, so the question is, can I define mature? How important is it to be mature? Well, mature is not a Hebrew word anyway, so the Chumash does not say the word mature. But basically, I would define the word mature by learning the 30 prakim of the book of Mishlei, which is kind of a manual about how to be mature. And that is, a mature person is a person who has developed a certain quality of character that we identified with Musar, meaning to say he's not impulsive. He doesn't just act on his gut reactions. He thinks before he acts. He tries to evaluate situations objectively and not through emotion. And he's able to manage. I mean, the highest level is not to have anger, but that's a very high level. But the level of normal maturity is that you can manage your anger in a good way. You don't lash out, you don't scream, and you're able to defer your taivas in the interest of something that's more significant. Those are qualities of mature, and mature is very important. In fact, that's really the reason why we don't get married at a young age. And Pirkei Avos says, to be honest, a man is supposed to get married at 18. And that makes a lot of sense. It makes a tremendous lot of sense to get married at 18 because hormones are raging, you have sexual desires, and halacha says you can't do you can't express it in any way. So it's tremendously difficult. I mean, I know what people go through. It's a tremendously difficult thing not to have any sexual expression and not to get married later. So why don't, and Chazal say, get married at 18. Girls got married even much younger. So why don't we get married at 18? We don't get married at 18 because of maturity. That's exactly it. In modern society, people are not mature at 18. In the olden days, by the time you were 18, you already had it. If you weren't in yeshiva, you already had a job for 4 years, right? You were making a living. Of course, in Poland, it wasn't much of a living, but whatever it was, you were making whatever living a Jew could make, whether it's Poland or in the Yemen, Sephardic countries as well. But today, at least Anglo people, we have prolonged adolescence. We're still adolescents when we're 35. So we have to wait. If you're not mature, you don't know how to have a relationship. You don't know how to not fly off the handle. As it were, when people get married at 23 or 24, there are a lot of problems sometimes. So maturity is very, very, very important. But, and maturity we get by working on our midos. We try to learn the parts of Torah that help us with it, but mainly it's musar, character refinement, and reflection, self-reflection. This is an important point. Musar doesn't just mean learning musar books. People think, I learned 15 minutes of Mesilas Yesharim, I did musar. No, that's only part of it. Musar also means doing your own inventory, your own cheshbon hanefesh, looking at what did I do wrong today, what did I do right today, why did I lose my temper today? Ask yourself, what made me fly off the handle, and what could I do that it shouldn't happen in the future? In other words, you got to personalize it. When people just learn musar as musar, it's a limud, to be sure. It's an important limud, but that's not really what Rabbi Salanter had in mind. He had the mind of looking into yourself. Rabbi Zelik Pliskin, I'll give you an example. He wrote many books, but I'll give you an example of a book that does exactly this. He has a book on anger, and the book is called Anger, the Hidden Teacher. And the title itself is a very interesting title, because here is his thesis. If you understand what makes you angry, then you understand what makes you tick. You understand who you are. So he said, you should use the anger to understand yourself. And he goes through different types of things. Why do I get angry if somebody says a certain thing to me? Am I hurt? Is it an assault on my self-esteem? Is it because I don't feel good about myself and he's bringing out something that I don't want to hear? In fact, everything, why do some people irritate you and some people don't? Right? Some people, they just irritate you. You get nervous when you're around them, right? We have those experiences. But ask yourself, why? Think about it. And that's moving you towards maturity, because you begin to understand yourself. You're not just this animal that has just reacts, but you understand what's going on. Now, you got to be careful. The Chazon Ish was a little concerned that this could turn into OCD. This could turn into obsessive compulsive, where you're thinking about, gee, why did I scratch my hand today and I didn't do it? You got to be careful not to get too much involved in contemplating your navel, so to speak. But a certain amount of that type of thought can help you a lot towards maturity. So maturity is very important, and that is why we delay marriages, even though there's a lot of cost in delaying marriages. Yeah. I'm sorry, you have one more aspect? Yeah.
So who's the author of that? The 30...
Pliskin, P-L, the book on anger I just mentioned?
No. The original, you talked about 30 prakim of...
Oh, Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech, the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs, King Solomon. Yeah, the wisest of all people. Yeah.
This question was sent in. The Rav said in a previous Q&A, actually a few times, that one won't be held to account for following the ARUCH HASHULCHAN. Would the same be true for MINHAG HAGRA or similar?
Yeah, so the question is, I've said a few times, I don't know if everybody who listens would agree, probably not, I'm sure not, that you will not be held to account for following the ARUCH HASHULCHAN, because ARUCH HASHULCHAN was a very, very great posek who lived around the same time as the Chafetz Chaim. He died earlier than the Chafetz Chaim. So the question is, well, what about other great poskim, such as the Gra, the Vilna Gaon? So the short answer is absolutely. I mean, listen, if the Vilna Gaon is not going to be held to account for following the Vilna Gaon, then you can follow the Vilna Gaon. But you cannot be selective. This is important. You can't say, oh, I like the Vilna. It's not like a Chinese menu. I'll take 2 from column A and 3 from column B. If you're a person who will follow all of the psukim of the Vilna Gaon, you have the right to do that. But if you're not going to follow all of the psukim, then you have to follow the mainstream codifications. Now, of course, the Mishnah Berurah in many cases follows the Vilna Gaon anyway, although not all the time. So that would be the thing. In fact, I believe it is recorded, strangely enough. I mean, it doesn't sound right to me, but I thought I actually saw it, that Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, who was a Litvish Gadol, right, Rav Aaron Kotler's father-in-law, a Litvish Gadol, but he wrote a big commentary on the Rambam called Even HaAzel. It's a great parish on the Rambam. He paskined like the Rambam in his own life. He followed all of the Piskei HaRambam. Now, the Piskei HaRambam are not the psukim of the Ramah. The Mechaber is more or less Piskei HaRambam, although even that's not 100%. The Ramah is like never the Rambam. So what's the heter of an Ashkenazi person to follow Piskei HaRambam? The answer is he adopted the Rambam as his posek, and he tried to follow him 100%. He didn't tell his students to do it, but he felt a connection to the Rambam that he wanted to follow. So I can't imagine if a person, as long as a person is consistent, a person could follow certainly the Vilna Gaon, for sure. Yeah.
So if I'm trying to understand how Tanakh Zchut works. So if somebody is for sure doing an AVEIRA, like he's for sure in front of your face doing something wrong, do you still have a chiyuv of Tanakh Zchut, or is Tanakh Zchut only when there's a suffix and you have to go and get the benefit of the doubt in that case?
Yeah, so the idea, Pirkei Avos tells us that we should always judge people favorably, judge the kaf zechus. So that would mean if I see you on a highway, let's say in the States, going into a McDonald's, so I am mechuyev to assume that you're either going to the bathroom or you're going for a cup of water or a Coke, and you're not going to eat treif, right? That's judging people with kaf zechut. Now, obviously, if I see the person doing an AVEIRA mamish, that's not shaykh. But here is an interesting observation Rav Chaim Shmulevitz made. It says in Avos to Rabbi Nassan, which is from the Tanoim, that why do you have to judge people a kaf zechut? Because you're supposed to imitate Hashem. Just as Hashem judges people a kaf zechut, I have to judge people a kaf zechut. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz asks in Aviya's Kasha, what on earth does it mean God judges you l'kaf zechus? If God sees you going into the McDonald's, He knows what you're going to be doing. What do you mean? God makes believe you're going to the bathroom when you're buying a hamburger, a Big Mac? In other words, I can judge people favorably because I give them the benefit of the doubt because I got a doubt. Klape Shmaya, there's no doubt. So what does it mean, judging l'kaf zechus? L'gabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So listen to what Rav Chaim says. This is a fascinating thought. He says, there is an aspect of l'kaf zechus where I simply assume the person is not doing a sin, but that's not God's kaf zechus. Rather, ever since Adam and Chava ate from the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what that means is everything in life is a mixture of good and evil. That means in our good there is evil, in our evil there is good. What does that mean? In our good there is evil. I do mitzvahs, I learn Torah, but my intentions are not 100% pure. I might be doing it for gaiva, I might be doing it for recognition. In my good, there are elements of bad. And vice versa. In my bad, in my sin, there's mitigating circumstances. I did it because I was depressed. I did it because I didn't have hope. Or I went to my best friend marrying a guy because I love my friend, and even though I shouldn't go to an intermarriage, but I did it out of compassion. So you did an AVEIRA, you did a sin. But in the sin, there was something good. So judging l'kaf zechus is, what do you choose to focus on in a person's action? In every action, there will be positive and negative. What do you look at? And what you look at in others is what Hashem looks at you. If I focus on the good, even in somebody's bad, or and I don't focus on the bad in somebody's good, then when Hashem looks at me, He will not focus on the bad in my good, and He will focus, as a mitigating circumstance, on the good within my bad. So what that would mean is the following. So let me give you a practical answer to your question. you see a person eating treif. So at that point, you can't play the Dan L'Kaf game that he went into the McDonald's to get a Coke or use the bathroom. You see, he ordered a Big Mac and he's biting into it. Now, maybe if you want to be crazy enough, you could say, well, maybe he put it in aluminum foil, or whatever. He gave the Big Mac guy a hamburger to prepare on the grill. Okay. But, we know that's not what happened, right? Although sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes crazy things do happen. Okay. But realistically, the way you judge L'Kaf Sechus is you say, he must be under a lot of pressure. It must be something that he's not himself. Maybe he's sick today. Maybe he's not thinking clearly. In other words, you try to find a mitigating Zechus, even in a person who doesn't have. So that's a very deeper level of Kaf Sechus. That's not just the Kaf Sechus, he didn't do an AVEIRA, but even within the AVEIRA, I try to understand. I try to understand. They tell a beautiful vort. There was a great Hasidic Rebbe, Rav Meir Yechiel of Ufstruf. It was the beginning of the 20th century. And somebody was describing a certain Gadol as a Gavra Rabbah, a great man. Gavra Rabbah, a great man. So Rav Moshe Yechiel said, I don't agree with your definition. You're defining a Gavra Rabbah as a Gadol B'Torah. But I'll give you an example of the definition the Gemara itself uses. Rava says in Maseches Malachos, some of you might have learned this, that how foolish are people who stand up in front of a Sefer Torah and they don't stand up in front of a Gavra Rabbah who's even greater than a Sefer Torah, in other words, a Talmid Chacham. And then the Gemara in Malachos asks, well, why does he say the person is greater than the Torah? So it gives a particular example. Because the Torah says, somebody commits a sin, they get 40 malchus. But the Gavra Rabbah says, it doesn't mean 40, it means 39. And therefore the Gavra Rabbah, kind of through Torah Shebaal Peh, has a higher authority than the Torah. So Rav Meir Yechiel says, why does the Gemara pick that? You can pick many, many examples where Chazal have the kayach to explain the Torah in a way that's not literal. So he says, Chazal are teaching you that the definition of a Gavra Rabbah is someone who tries to take away some of the suffering of a fellow Jew. The Torah says this Jew is supposed to get 40. We say, let's make it 39. That's what make a person a Gavra Rabbah. So the point is, you look at someone with Sechus. That's a bechina of you become a Gavra Rabbah in that way. You want to make him not so bad in the eyes of God. Hashem loves the Jewish people. And when we show that we love the Jewish people, we're giving Hashem nachas in that. Yeah.
So I know when it comes to shidduchim in the HAREDI world, it's really a few days even could be until they close or so. But for all of us that are Balei Tshuva, how many dates, for how long do you think one should date before making the proposal?
Yeah. This reminds me a little bit, although I'm really just free associating here. A British lady once asked Stalin, how long will you keep on killing people? And Stalin said, as long as necessary. So just, my answer to you is, I don't know why, it's not a dimion at all, but I would say the same answer, as long as necessary. And here's the point. The point basically is that it is understood that a person's history, a person's background, the types of things they're used to, affect how long it may take for them to be secure in the commitments that they're going to make. Remember, our hope and our prayer is that marriage is a lifelong commitment. That is our hope. It's not always that way. Unfortunately, the Torah does allow for a gershon, but you don't get married with the intention of getting divorced. You get married with the intention that you're making a lifelong commitment to each other. And as a result, you try not to marry when you're still insecure and unsure if this is the right person. Now, in the HAREDI community, the expectations are different. They're defined in different ways. So you're habituated that you don't need to be that extensive. in the secular world, or that a person might come from, sometimes you need a little more time. But even then, I mean, I don't want to give you a definite thing. Usually I would say it should be under 10 times. But I don't want to suggest there's an absolute rule. Because I do want to say that if it drags out a little too long, what is often happening is not really, I'm not sure if this is the right person. It may mean a fear to make a commitment. And that, in fact, is a psychological problem. That is a real problem, that I just am afraid of making a commitment. Maybe because my parents were divorced. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why. And I've seen bad marriages. Maybe because I have friends that got into bad marriages. But that is an issue, that if a person finds that they have or I don't want to be tied down generally, I like my independence. That's also true, right? Once you're married, forget about your independence, right? No, okay. Not really, but okay. So the thing is, take your time. Nobody should rush you into it. But at some point, you got to ask yourself, are there really problems here? Or is the problem that I'm just not able to come to a decision? And there are very good marriage therapists and very good books written from a Jewish perspective, from a Torah perspective, that talk about this idea of how to become a more committed person in that way. So it's okay to do a little bit longer than the standard HAREDI, but at some point you need to ask yourself those hard questions. Yeah.
And how does someone in Israel, like what kippah you wear and what you wear, people attribute so many types of connections to you just walking around that you might not even intend.
Yeah.
Like I just remember this a couple days ago, there was like a big protest downtown and people were being obnoxious and rude and like stopping trains and all this stuff. And it was like a big chilul Hashem. And I was just minding my own business and people thought I had something to do with it just because I was wearing a white shirt. And I felt like it was like Marit Ayin, just wearing a white shirt and called kippah. How can someone how can someone express the fact that they're just a from Jew and not anything else associated with
well, you're lucky the police didn't think you were part of it. They would started beating you up, and it's happened, by the way. Sometimes guys like to see you like to see the street theater, but it's not the safest thing to do. Sometimes the police will just like indiscriminately beat people up or arrest them. Yeah, so you know what they say? They say that Eskimos have I don't know if it's true, they have 300 different names for snow or for the color white because they're so sensitive to different types of snow and ice, they have to know, so they can see gradations in color that we would not even be able to see. So by the same token, the religious world of Israel, we have 300 flavors of frumkeit that to a typical American, even yeshiva person, would almost be indistinguishable. Like, what exactly is the difference between Rav Chaim Knesset and Rav Shmuel Auerbach? I mean, they come from two different worlds? They certainly don't, right? I mean, but there's like a millimeter of difference between them, and that gets magnified into a totally different thing. So as a result, in Eretz Yisrael, we have gradations of religiosity that would be virtually imperceptible in the broader world, and they become big, major divisions, where you have Haredi, Dati Liumi, then you subdivide Haredi into Hasidim and Misnagdim, and then you have Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and then you subdivide Moroccan, Tunisian, Egyptian, Syrian, Hungarian, German, Polish, Russian, Lithuanian, east of the Oder River, west of the Oder River. You'd just be amazed at the gradations that exist. Slobodka versus Kelm. In fact, they even have a story. I'm trying to find this. This is such a great humorous story about a guy. This is a long answer to you. A guy was about to jump off the bridge downtown, and this is a story. And somebody said, "Don't stop! Don't jump!" And he says, "Well, why shouldn't I jump?" So the guy says, "Are you a Jew?" He says, "Yes, I'm a Jew." "Baruch Hashem, I'm a Jew too." "Are you Ashkenazi or Sephardi?" He says, "I'm Ashkenazi." "I'm Ashkenazi too, we have so much in common." And this went on for 20 levels of commonality. "Did you learn like in Mir?" "Yeah, I learned in Mir, Baruch Hashem." No, together, Baruch Hashem. So the last question involved 20 levels. He says, "Are you like a brisker who learns Musar at this place?" And the very last of 20 questions, I can't do it justice, they were different. They were like 99.99%, everything was the same. One difference at the end, he says, go jump, who cares? You know. And putting aside the halachos of sinas chinam and everything else, putting that aside, it's really so unfortunate that we make these divisions in that way when, I look at a dati leumi person, we're 99% or more the same. Shabbos, kashrus, Torah learning. We believe in Hashem. We believe in mitzvahs. All right, so we have a difference about Zionism, different thing, this and that. But we're the same. I mean, we're connected. Why can't we connect? Now, you're kind of asking almost the opposite question, though. You're asking not about division. You're asking about being lumped together with people.
How can it be generic
Yeah,
from Jew?
right. I want to be a generic. I want to be a from Jew. I don't want to be HAREDI. I don't want to be dati leumi. I want to be a religious Jew who serves Hashem. Very good. In Israel, ain't no such person. That's part of the problem. And you're right. You're right. We ought to found a community where the only qualification is you believe in Hashem and the Torah and the 13 principles of faith, and in Torah, Avoda, Gemilas Chasadim, and all of the other political issues. Everybody can do their own thing and follow their own way. I think that's perfect. That's a wonderful, wonderful community. It's a little hard to find here, frankly. It is hard to find because people feel very strongly about ideological issues, and they create groups, and it's hard to be non-affiliated. Although I think ultimately that's a good idea. It is a good idea, but it's a little hard to do.
Would it be better just to wear like a blue shirt instead of a white one?
Oh, in terms of just
that way, no one can categorize you, so they don't think anything about you. Like I don't know what this is.
I don't know what to say, because on one hand, you want to identify with the overall values of, let's say, Haredi society, but you don't want to identify with the excesses or the abusive behaviors. I mean, listen, even among bona fide, black hat people, a lot of people very much are against these demonstrations. I mean, it's not just like, you. Many people are being painted with a unfair brush. I mean, I think the whole thing is a chilul Hashem. And Rav Shmuel Auerbach, Zichrono Livracha, who was the spiritual guide to this group of people, he was the son of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Now, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a man of absolute shalom, absolute peace. Never, ever, ever would there be a machlokas. Now, his son, Rav Shmuel, who was a gaon and a tzaddik, absolutely. God forbid, I would never, ever disparage Rav Shmuel. Rav Shmuel had a different view, that he felt that at times you have to be more militant and the like, and he created this movement. But even then, as long as he was alive, the movement had some guidance from Gedolim. He was a Gadol. Rav Chaim Kanievsky thought it was wrong even when he was alive. Rav Chaim Kanievsky was very much against it. Okay. But at least they had a Gadol. Now, it's a bunch of wild animals. I'll tell you the truth. I mean, now, it is not led by any Gadol at all. It's just a bunch of kids who would like to take afternoon Seder off. And, and I'm wondering to myself, I mean, they're demonstrating over how important Torah learning. I don't see them learning during these demonstrations. I mean, you're taking off a few hours to show, we stand for Torah learning, most important thing. Okay. So, Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Steinman were absolutely against this, even in the life of Rav Shmuel Auerbach. They were mamish against it. But now it's much worse than it was. Much worse than it was, because now it is hefkeris, it is wildkeit, wildness. It is not under the direction of any gadol b'Torah. And when you have a bunch of kids running the show, it's going to be a big chilul Hashem, a big desecration of God's name. So what do you do? It's hard to say. But all I can say is that there are enough white-shirted, black-hatted, black-jacketed people who are not part of this that I don't think people should automatically assume that if you're dressed a certain way, you're part of it. Right? So I don't think you have to change in that way. Yeah.
Related to what the Rav just answered. Someone I used to learn with is a Baal Tshuva who's thinking of coming to Israel to learn in yeshiva. And he's working at a HESDER yeshiva.
HESDER yeshiva, yeah.
So there are a lot of similarities between ourselves and people who go to Hazar yeshivas.
Yeah.
But there are differences as well. So do I just encourage him to go to yeshiva, or do I also say there's other choices that
Right. So the question is HESDER, right? HESDER yeshiva is the religious Zionist yeshivas that combine learning Torah with a certain amount of military service. And the exact mix of the Torah and the military depends on the HESDER yeshivas. Some HESDER yeshivas, like the first HESDER yeshiva, Merkas Harav, Rav Kook's yeshiva, the military service is actually very small. Very little, but it's still there. Other HESDER yeshivas, it's a half-half or whatever it would be. So the question would be, if I have influence on my friend wants to go to yeshiva, and he's thinking about a HESDER yeshiva, should I steer him away or use my influence to get him to another yeshiva, or do I just accept, this is what he does, so Beseder, let it be okay. So I would say this, I would not tell you to steer him away, but I would tell you to give him information. In other words, in order for him to make a decision that's right for him, he needs to know what the options are. He says, in HESDER, there is this, and in non-HESDER, there is this. And then you can then talk about your own experience in a non-HESDER yeshiva and say, I see the milas in a non-HESDER environment as so-and-so. In other words, the point is, you don't disparage the concept of HESDER. HESDER has a validity. But as a friend, you can talk about the milas of a non-HESDER yeshiva. There are more learning, more intense Talmud Torah, whatever it would be. So by all means, you don't have to keep quiet. Give him the information, and even give him an opinion, but it shouldn't be done in a way that is disparaging or trashing of that, because the HESDER is a shita, and it's a respectable shita, and it's not something that you should be mavatal.
Not just in terms of the army aspect, but in terms of differences in philosophy, because there are differences.
Well, there are. Well, obviously, the Zion, Dati Leumi institution has a philosophy of Zionism and a philosophy about the Medina that would be different. I think your role at that point is to give him the information. He should know what he's doing. And then you can discuss, again, I mean, this can be a discussion. You can discuss what the HASHKAFA that you were makabel from your Rabbis are. But you do it on the level of ideas, not on the level of, this is treif, this is apikorsis, you go there, it's like you're a guy, whatever, the way people sometimes talk. You don't talk that way. But, certainly you're entitled to talk about, have a discussion in HASHKAFA about what is the right derech for people. Yeah.
Building on this question, it seems like a lot of the Tanakh learning, or the emphasis on Tanakh, happens more in like the Dati Leumi as their world.
Yeah.
Why did that occur, that Tanakh is emphasized more in just one segment of the Jewish population?
Yeah, so the question is that you're suggesting that within the Orthodox world, you find that there's a greater emphasis of Tanakh in the religious Zionist world than there might be in the HAREDI yeshiva world, where Tanakh is not emphasized, or at least Nach, Nevi'im and Kesuvim, are not emphasized that much. The question is why that would be so. Well, first of all, on the simplest level, let's break it down into two questions. Number one, why and when did Tanakh get kind of ignored in the yeshiva Haredi world? So I talked about this actually maybe a week or maybe 2 weeks ago. Part of it is, this is an unfortunate casualty of the Haskalah, that when the Enlightenment started and a lot of the people in Eastern Europe who were maskilim, they were rebelling against Gemara and against Halakha, and they said rabbinic Judaism is paralyzing and suffocating. We're going to go to the Bible for the original sources of Judaism. So in a sense, what happened was the Maskilim stole Tanakh from Klal Yisrael by kind of saying, anyone who learns Tanakh is because they no longer believe in Gemara. So it's really guilt by association, and in many ways it is unfair. I will tell you, you should be aware that there actually, if you look at New Svarim, and I check New Svarim all the time, you will actually see that over the past 10 to 15 years, there's been a big resurgence of Haredi books on Nach. You will actually find them. I can give you some titles on it. Now, it's a different approach. a Haredi book on Nach will be a different type of book than a Dati Leumi book on Nach. But Nach is being reclaimed a little bit more, and that's a very good thing. Not that I want to give you a commercial, but I myself, I think I mentioned on Kol HaLashon, which has many shiurim, I give a daily perek of Nach. We're already in the middle of Yeshayahu, and I tell you, it's one of the hardest things I've ever. Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim were manageable. Those are the narrative stories. Once you get to Yeshayahu, it is a tough book. But it's one of those things that you're grateful you're getting through. I mean, I've learned it quickly before, but now it's a little more thoroughly. You feel virtuous when you get yourself through it. So it's something you should do. But the other idea is, I think, that so much of Tanakh is connected to the land of Israel, the battles, the the sites, the places. If you're a Dati Leumi, you have this love for the land, for the archaeology, for all of these wars. A Haredi mentality, again, I'm overgeneralizing, there are many exceptions, but a Haredi mentality doesn't care about this battle and that battle and this and that. They focus less on it, so there's going to be less of an interest in a lot of it. Yeah.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
In theory, the Haredi opposition should be to the Medina element of the land, but anything in Tanakh that's talking about the land is not like the Adamah. So why would there be more interest in...
No, you're 100% correct. Eretz Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael are two totally different concepts. And even a Haredi, even the most anti-Zionist, even in a Turei Karta, should love Eretz Yisrael as a holy place. But still, as I say, it's kind of guilt by association that if you have a segment that... Well, I'll give you an extreme example. Ben Gurion. Right? Not Dati Leumi, not Dati at all. Ben Gurion was a great lover of Tanakh. He knew Tanakh very well, and he loved Tanakh. So it's almost like, if Ben Gurion likes it, can't be good. That's that's crazy, obviously. That's very insane. But that's kind of a gut reaction. These are things that non-religious people find important. But as I say, Baruch Hashem, you should check the new Svarim. You will see there is more and more writing on Nach, even coming from yeshiva people, from Haredi people. Also, I want to point out that Haredi people yeshiva people bring an interesting perspective on Nach, which is underrepresented in the other literature, and that is they emphasize the halachic issues in Nach, which is very, very interesting. In other words, a lot of parshanut will not delve into halachic questions that arise from narratives. The yeshiva-trained person, or the Haredi yeshiva-trained person, is very interested in halachic matters, and therefore they will look at that. So, in a way, if you want to get a whole picture, you've got to look at both types of books. The Dati Leumi Parshanut will be heavy on geography, archaeology, parallels with Assyrian and Babylonian culture. Now, so when the book of Malachim talks about Nebuchadnezzar, it'll augment the discussion with inscriptions and the like. And that's the historical, archaeological aspect, which is good. And then the Haredi books will emphasize the halachic aspects and some of the Musar aspects. So together you can get a nice picture of this. Yeah.
This question was sent in. If you see a Talmid Chacham with his zipper down or hat on backwards, should you say something? And then I'd also like to add my own part to that, which is in general.
Getting personal here. Okay.
In general, if you see a Rav or a Bacher, a fellow Bacher, doing something wrong, how do you go about rebuking him or correcting him?
Yeah, let me answer the second one first. I'll get to the first one. The second one is basically we should not really correct people that much. There is a mitzvah in the Torah that if somebody is doing something wrong, there's a mitzvah to give them tochacha. There is a mitzvah to correct them. Hocheach tochiach et hamisacha. There is a mitzvah in the Torah, right? So that is a starting point. But the Gemara itself gives us many situations where that's not a proper response. For example, if the person will get resentful, he will not listen to you. He will maybe hate Torah more because of your tochacha. It is actually better to be silent. Also, you can only give tochacha if you're acting out of love. You care about the person, not because you want to show that you're better than them or whatever it is. So because of this, somebody asked Rabbi Akiva, and they said, how come nobody accepts rebuke today? And Rabbi Akiva said, because nobody knows how to give rebuke today. And that was in Rabbi Akiva's time, and Kal V'chomer today. Pirkei Avos, when it enumerates one of the 48 ways that the Torah is acquired, it says, you shall love tochacha. So some people think that means, I love to give tochacha. Sure, I love tochacha. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean I love to give, but it means I love to receive. I love if somebody can show me how I could be better. That's a very high madrega. It's very hard. It's very hard to love tochacha. Almost none of us love tochacha, but the highest level is I want to be makabel tochacha. So by and large, you generally should not get involved in tochacha, but if it's somebody who is your friend, somebody who knows you care about them, then you can talk about it in a gentle way. You don't start criticizing. You say, see, I saw something, and I wonder if I could talk to you about it. And maybe you learn the halacha together. And don't be accusatory, don't be judgmental, just like ask him, maybe we could talk about it a little bit. But only if it's a friend, only if you're connected. You should not give tochacha to strangers, including people in yeshiva that you don't really know. I think you'll notice that fellow Bachrim give more tochacha than Rebbeim. You'll notice a Rebbe here typically does not go over to students that much and give tochacha. But guys like to give tochacha. And one of the things you learn is sometimes be quiet. Now, in terms of the question of hats, zipper, things like that, once again, you can give tochacha to a Rebbe as well, but you have to do it in a very, very respectful way. There is a certain inyan of kavod. It's similar to giving tochacha to your father. Right? You can give tochacha to your father, but you do it as a question. Rebbe or father, I saw something that I'm not sure is right. Can you tell me if this is the right thing to do or whatever it is? But even then, one should be very, very cautious in doing tochacha, because tochacha can sometimes create embarrassment. It can create resentments. It can create machlokas. So what do Chazal say? Just like there's a mitzvah to say something that will be listened to, there is a mitzvah to not to say something that will not be listened to. They have a cute story about this. There was a man in a town, in a shtetl, he was from, but he was very stingy. He never gave tzedakah. So the Rav said, I want to meet with you. Come to my house, we have to have a meeting. So the person had covered for the Rav. He shows up, he sits at the Rav's table, and the Rav says nothing to him. They sit in silence for a half an hour. So finally the person coughs and says, Rebbe, I'm honored to be with you, but I'm just wondering why I'm here. So the Rav said, well, you're here because you're helping me fulfill a great mitzvah. And the great mitzvah is, Chazal say, just like it's a mitzvah to tell somebody something that they're going to listen to, there's a mitzvah not to tell somebody something that they're not going to listen to. So I wanted to be Makayim, the mitzvah of not saying anything to a person who's not going to listen. So unfortunately, the Rav lost that mitzvah because the guy then gave tzedakah. So kind of reverse psychology. That's how the Rav got the money out of him in that way. Yeah.
As somewhat of like a Baal TESHUVA, I had access to complete openness when I was choosing Yadut. So I feel like I've been able to make a very well-informed decision and came to my opinions very rationally. Now, when I have kids, God willing, to what extent do I give my kids that same openness and that ability to read whatever they want and develop their own original thinking at the cost or at the fear of at the danger of having them go off?
Yeah, that is a very, very fascinating question that really every Baal Tshuva is going to grapple with, right? And really, almost every parent, even outside of Judaism. Do you want your kids to do everything you did? right? On one hand, the things we did formed us and gave us insight and gave us experience. On the other hand, we don't want we don't want our kids to do those things that maybe we're not so right. Even a trivial example. There are Rosh Yeshivas who grew up on television. It was television in the 50s or whatever it is. So they'll sometimes make a joke about Abbott and Costello or the Three Stooges or Dick Van Dyke, whatever it is, some old thing. And it's part of them, and it's part of how they communicate to people. But chas v'shalom, they would never let their kids in a million years be exposed even to that innocuous. I mean, in those days, TV was much more innocuous than it is today. So here's the question. If you became religious through searching and through examining and looking at all sorts of ideas, do I then say, I've come to a decision of what is the right way of life, and I want my kids to follow that way? I'm just restating your question. Or do I say, I want them to have this process of discovery as well? It's a very, very excellent question. It's a very difficult question. I would say this. As a parent raising children at a younger age, you have to impart your values. That is your responsibility. Like sometimes parents say, I'm not going to tell my child what to do. I want him to find out on his own. Well, an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old is not capable of doing that. So at least initially, you got to be proactive and you have to be directive. At some point, maybe when they're older, when they're 18, 20, you might judiciously and they may do it on their own anyway at that point, but you might judicially suggest, not everything, but you might suggest things that could broaden their horizons and give them different perspectives. But part of being a parent is to give a child direction. You don't simply say, let the child decide, right? So I do understand that there's a cost in insularity, because there is a cost, because it may very well be that the richness of the frum identity that your child has, or the depth of it, may not be as deep as you, because you came from search and you came from struggle. You're right. There is something that gets sacrificed at the next generation. But the problem is the dangers of the alternative might be so great that you may have to sacrifice the optimal in order to avoid the tragic. And that's kind of the dilemma that we have as parents. It's a very excellent question. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so the Rav spoke earlier this week about the idea that if there would be, in theory, no one keeping Shabbat, the bracha of Shabbat would not extend to the 6 weeks, and then we would...
Right. That's the ARUCH, yeah.
Right. So I guess the question would be, is that in any way correlated to keeping Malava Malka, or is that just Shabbat itself? And then I guess another question on that is that if one were not to keep to Shabbat, but we keep Malava Malka, the extension to the week still apply?
Right. So again, just to repeat the question, I had mentioned this week a very, very fascinating teaching of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who says that every Shabbos Hashem renews the universe for 6 days at a time, and the next Shabbos it needs a new renewal, and that comes from the Jews keeping Shabbos. So if chas v'shalom there wouldn't be a Jew keeping Shabbos, the world would self-destruct after Shabbos. It would have no basis for keeping it going for the next 6 days. So the question would be, well, what if I don't keep Shabbos, but I keep Malava Malka? Or what if I keep Shabbos and I don't keep Malava Malka? Meaning, what is the thing that gives the world that spiritual energy? I have to assume that although Malava Malka is very important, I'll talk about that for a moment, but I have to assume the Orach Chaim is talking about the Iker of Shabbos. You can't, Malava, as beautiful as Malava Malka is, it is absolutely secondary to Shabbos itself. So I would say that Malava Malka may increase the energy coming into the world. That much I would say. But it's a davar pashut. If you have Malava Malka without Shabbos, that's not going to do anything. Malava Malka does have something that's very important for us today. And let me mention this. I don't know if I must have mentioned it some point earlier in the week. The war of Russia-Ukraine. So the famous words of the Vilna Gaon, more than 250 years ago, that when Russia retakes or enters the Crimea, start putting on your garments for Mashiach And when they reach Istanbul, the Black Sea, go through the Black Sea, Mashiach is coming. And there's an old tradition, a very old tradition, that identifies Russia with Gog and Magog. This goes back, again, hundreds of years. There's something about Russia that's connected to Gog and Magog, the enemy from the north, and the like. So this actually means we are in a dangerous situation. Besides the war itself, this could escalate. I mean, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, b'li ayin hara. This could escalate to nuclear. I mean, Putin is. It's hard to know how he got crazy in that way, because he was always wily, but he was not crazy. But now there seems to be an element of fanaticism here. We're not really sure what is going on with him. But God forbid this could escalate to nuclear war, and this gives rise to another teaching of the Vilna Gaon, that the war of Gog and Magog will last 12 minutes. Now, nobody ever understood, what's a 12-minute war? Now, unfortunately, we do understand what a 12-minute war is. So this is frightening. Now, what does that have to do with Malava Malka? Chazal say, if you're conscientious in keeping Malava Malka, you will be saved from the pains of Mashiach and the wars of Gog and Magog. So I would say this is a good time to strengthen yourself in Malava Malka, because Gog and Magog might be coming. And Bichlal, it says, for all Chavlei Mashiach, all birth pains of Mashiach, the 3 meals of Shabbos are help you. That's we say in the Zmiros, Me Chavlei Mashiach Yutzalu Lirvacha. From the birth pains of Mashiach shall we be saved in the merit of Shabbos. It's in the Shabbos Zmiros, right? So that's a remez. Right? You can go through the Zmiros. This might be a nice thing to do on a Friday, to go through Zmiros with a commentary, an art school commentary, whatever. You'll see how many lines in the Zmiros are from Gemaras. They're taken basically Gemaras, Midrashim, and the like. So Malava Malka is a big deal, but I don't think it can replace keeping Shabbos. Yeah.
When we refer to Rav, we say in the third person, we say, what does the Rav think?
Yep.
So when we say to Hashem a bracha, we say Baruch Atah. Why are we
Baruch
more
Atah.
respectful to
Yeah.
Rav than we are to Hashem?
That's a very good question. The Rav, third person, not always, but people like to talk that way, and sometimes they're expected to talk that way. With Hashem, I can be buddy. I can say, hey, God, you, listen. Right? It's a very good question. What, you're machshiv people more than you're machshiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How can that be? So, I don't know if I have a complete answer. I'll give you something that may connect to it. The Avudraham, which we talked about earlier, about Shabbos, but the Avudraham makes a very interesting observation about a bracha, that every bracha actually switches from second person to third person. Let's talk about Shahakol. Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech olam, Shahakol niya bidvaro. Everything came into existence through His word. Now, it should say, Shahakol niya bidvarecha. So in every bracha, we go from direct to third person. So we do have the third person component. The Avudraham says, this is because we have two relationships with God. We have a relationship with God that is based on love and friendship and immediacy. You. And then we have something based on awe and reverence. And that's Yiras Hashem. And every bracha encompasses the two perspectives of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So the question still is, it doesn't really answer your question. So how come by a Rebbe I talk in third person, right? I'm only emphasizing the Yira. I'm not emphasizing the Ava. It is a good question. It could be that the Rebbe is showing you Ava in other ways, hopefully. Or it could be the Rebbe doesn't have Ava for you. That's the negative side of the story. But I think the familiarity with Hashem stems from the fact that we are so sure of Hashem's love. And by the way, that's also reflected in many ways. Hashem is called Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We are called Banim, children of Hashem, We are called Avadim. You see, it's a matchup. Avinu is Banim, Malkeinu is Avadim. Right? Avinu, Malkeinu, right? So, in a way, maybe, and again, I'm thinking out loud, maybe we need to have that familiarity with Hashem so we can be convinced of the depth of his love. Maybe with a human being, I could see that he loves me, and even though I emphasize the yira. L'gabe Hashem, maybe it's the opposite. I would not intuitively feel Hashem's love, so I need in my tefillas to kind of internalize that idea. Just something to think about, but I'll think about it some more. It's a very excellent point. Yeah.
What does the Rose think about the YESHIVA using the N-word? And is the fact that some people, in some communities, the N-word is a term of endearment? Can that play a factor?
Yeah. Mean the black community itself is a term of endearment. Is that
Not just that.
Is that?
Other people that, if they're accepted in the black community, they can also say it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Well, my practical advice is don't assume you're a member of that community. You may be at the wrong end of a knife. But okay. If a person is mechavein to be mavazeh somebody, if you're mechavein to denigrate somebody, it is not the derech of a ben Torah. The derech of a ben Torah is not to denigrate other human beings, including goyim. Pirkei Avos says, "Chavev adam shenivra b'tzelem." All human beings are beloved because they are created in the image of God. The Jewish people have a special relationship with Hashem. That's true, but all human beings are b'tzelem Elokim. So in our chinuch, we should not teach our children to look down at other people, to denigrate other people, to consider them inferior. I mean, listen, if a neighborhood is dangerous, we can tell them, don't go to that neighborhood because it's dangerous. But we don't have to be mavazeh people. And if you see Gedolim, you will see that this is never, ever how they talk. They would never say. Now, to be malamed zechus a little bit, I mean, the Yiddish word, schwarze. Schwarze just means black. I mean, there's nothing any worse than saying someone's black, which was a common, although it's not the favored usage even in America, but that was the common usage. But still, schwarze is often said in a negative way, etc. But you have to understand that sometimes, at least the Ashkenazi attitude towards Goyim was forged out of some very, very bitter experiences. Talk about the Holocaust, talk about the Crusades, talk about what went on in Poland and the Ukraine for so many centuries. So, there's a saying in politics that a conservative is a liberal who was mugged. Did you ever hear that one? That means until I'm mugged, I love everybody. Once I'm mugged, I look at people in a different way. I mean, here in Israel, even anti-Arab rhetoric. That's not good either. But you have to understand. If you had a child blown up in a bus, or a best friend who died in a terrorist attack, you're going to have a lot of anger. This is just human. So I don't judge harshly people who have, anger and resentment, either towards blacks, towards Arabs. A lot of it comes from experience. But in terms of our chinuch and in terms of where we should be, we should learn that everyone is entitled to respect. That's Selam Elokim. Yeah.
In the Chumash, oftentimes people who aren't, Israelites or Jews, if you see in the art scroll, it says like Hashem's name. They use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, like in a reference. So whether it's like Pharaoh's magicians, for example, like this is Hashem, or like the woman who in Joshua, who the first chapter where they saved, she mentions Hashem. So like, how do we picture them using Hashem's name?
Well, let me ask you another question. Did they speak Hebrew? In other words, like this: the Egyptian people or Paro is quoted as saying words, and those words are Hebrew words. Well, did he say Hebrew words? I say, you're asking about the name of God. I'm asking more about. So obviously, what is going on here is the Torah itself is translating what Paro said into, in fact, maybe even paraphrasing. In fact, there's no particular reason to assume that the Torah is even giving me an exact quote. In other words, Hashem is telling me what Paro's statement meant. See what I'm saying? So in that way, the Shem HaMefarish was not something that Paro said. It's Hashem dictated to Moshe how Paro's words should be represented in the biblical text. In fact, we know Paro didn't know Hebrew. We know that. That's why Yosef was the interpreter, etc. So that's how you have to understand those narratives. Yeah.
In Mashiach, will any, I guess, new Torah, so to speak, be released? For example, by Megillas Esther was by what happened in Persia. Will anything be written on the Holocaust, for example, or the Tekus by Eliyahu Rabbi, etc.?
Yes, that's very interesting. What's going to happen? So the one thing we know, according to the Rambam at least, that when Mashiach comes, no mitzvos are going to change and no mitzvos are going to be deleted, etc. All right, Rav Yosef Albo argues with that. Rav Yosef Albo says, according to Ben Zomer, we're not going to mention the Exodus of Mitzrayim when Mashiach comes. All right, that's an arichas. We actually talked about that a while ago. But the question that you're asking is, will there be some observances to commemorate the new events? Like we have a Megillas Esther for the delivery of Purim. So shouldn't we have some Megillah about the coming of Mashiach? Because after all, we're going to have prophets again. We're going to have Nevi'im. And they could write with Ruach HaKodesh.
Will there be like any new writings, so to speak?
Meaning, there's new Kesuvim, new Nevi'im, and new Kesuvim. That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I mean, after all, certainly Messianic redemption is entitled to a write-up. Now, in terms of Eliyahu Hanavi, that's a different question. That's simply a question of resolving halacha. And we're going to have a Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin is going to resolve halacha. So many machloksim are going to get resolved. Many issues that there are different opinions, we will get a definitive psak. That much of a change, we can be very confident we're going to have. But in terms of new ksuvim, new nevi'im, that's a very interesting question. I think there is a possibility for sure. Yeah.
I'm wondering why we move to the left and right by Zeb and the Kedusha, and we do the feet thing.
Yeah, lift up. Yeah, so by Kedusha, many have the minhag, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. You lift yourself up on your toes, and also turn left, turn to the right. So basically, the idea is that what is Kedusha? Kedusha is emulating the angels who sing their song of praise to Hashem, right? What does it say? Nikadesh shimcha b'olam, kishem shemakdishim oso bishmei marom. The way they sanctify Hashem in heaven. Kakasova yad neviyacha, right? And this is from Yeshayahu. V'kara zel zeh, they call to each other, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. And in Yecheskel, which is another vision of the heaven, Baruch Kavod. In fact, I don't know if you know this. Why is Hashem called HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It actually is connected to Kedusha. Because the two psukim that praise Hashem is Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakos. And the second is Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo. He's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The one to whom we say, or the Malachim say, Kadosh Ubaruch. Okay? So basically, therefore, what you're doing is you're trying to imitate the angels, because it says the angels turn to each other. So you turn to your right, you turn to your left, V'kara zel zeh v'yamar. So that actually, it's not everybody does it, but that has a makor in the behavior of the angels. Lifting the toes, actually, although that's a more common minhag, more people do that than turn, there's less of a makor for that. It doesn't say the angels lift up their toes. But apparently the minhag started with the idea that since we're imitating the malachim, we want to lift ourselves up, so to speak. We want to raise ourselves to a heavenly level. Okay, one more question, or that's it, or yeah.
In historical Judaism, there seemed to have been a huge emphasis on the Sanhedrin and as a body that's used to be posek halacha for Israel. I think even in Rambam's Haftamah, it seems like he considered the decisions of the Gemara as having the status, because they were accepted by all of Klal Yisrael, having the status of it being decided by a Sanhedrin. We're getting to a point in Eretz Yisrael today that there's a rove, almost or near a rove, Is there a movement, or should there be a movement to reestablish a Sanhedrin?
Well, there actually is a movement to reestablish the Sanhedrin, and in fact, there is actually a body that calls itself Sanhedrin. Most Gedolim or most Rabbanim do not accept it, but there is a functioning body. They even have a website. Rabbi Steinsaltz, Zichrono Livracha, was the head of the Sanhedrin, etc. But he himself said that this is only preliminary. This was not a real Sanhedrin. I mean, on one hand, he was the head of an organization called Sanhedrin, but he said it's not a real Sanhedrin. Okay. Now, here's the main issue. This issue really is the same issue that was faced in the 1500s. And that is, in order to have a Sanhedrin, we have to have what is called smicha. Smicha is unbroken ordination from Moshe Rabbeinu. Smicha presently does not exist, so all of us rabbis that have smicha, we are fakers. None of us have smicha. We have a diploma that says we could paskin on Jewish law. Even that might be a fake, but whatever it would be. So the thing is, in the 1500s, Rav Yaakov Bei Rav, who was the Rebbe of Rav Yosef Karo, took the halachic position based on a Rambam that if most of the sages of Israel want to recreate ordination, they could create ordination, and that could pave the way for a Sanhedrin. And Rav Yaakov Bei Rav felt that spiritually that would bring Mashiach. And because of this, Rav Yaakov Bei Rav ordained 4 Talmidim. He gave smicha to Rav Yosef Karo, and to Rav Moshe Alshich, and to the Mabit, Moshe ben Yosef Trani, and I believe the 4th is a little less known, but he must have been a very great person, Rav Moshe Galanti. However, it petered out. I think there was one more generation of a few people that got it, but after 2 generations, they stopped doing it because the Chachamim of Yerushalayim did not accept it. This was a Tzfat-based initiative. So, in a sense, any movement to create a Sanhedrin would be predicated on that old discussion. So the good news is we have a tremendous record of halachic analysis that can be consulted there, because this literally was the issue that was faced in the 1500s. The bad news is that the halachic consensus at the time was not to do it, and I can be pretty confident that that would be the majority halachic consensus even today. But you're describing exactly what was called the smicha controversy.
And the main issue there is just that there is not enough consensus that smicha would work, or is there concern that if you were to accept the smicha, there would be worse implications perhaps?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, there are halachic arguments that we don't have that authority. That's the halachic arguments. The policy arguments are that you're opening up a Pandora's box, because who would be on the Sanhedrin, who would be ordained, God forbid, the theoretical possibility that a Reform rabbi would get smicha or whatever it would be. But then the way the Israeli society is structured, even if you had a Dati Liumi, great Talmid Chacham, there would be a lot of controversy about that. So as a practical matter, you're not going to get the imprimatur on this type of arrangement. But you can even Google this. If you Google smicha controversy, there must be, I didn't see it, but there must be even a Wikipedia article. It's called Smicha Controversy. And it's a well-known episode in Jewish history involving Rav Yaakov Bei Rav and Rav Yosef Karo. Yeah.
Do you think it's okay if a Jew is Dati Leumi, or like does a Jew have to be HAREDI?
Yeah, some of my best friends are Dati Leumi. No, there's nothing. No. I mean, chas v'shalom. I mean that is a pernicious. I mean, I'm not condemning you, but that is a libelous statement. That is an absolutely wrong statement. One could say that I disagree with a number of points in Dati Leumi HASHKAFA, but one cannot look at a Dati Leumi and say he's not a good Jew. So one would have to discuss the particular issues. Like, first of all, Dati Leumi itself is not a one-size-fit-all category. There's a whole subgroup within Dati Leumi called Chardal. Now, this is a pun. Chardal means mustard, but it's an abbreviation. Chardal is HAREDI Dati Leumi. In other words, HAREDI, but also a Zionist, right? So you have different things. You have Dati Leumi that's much more modern, and then you have Dati Leumi that's very, very HAREDI, right? So you have to identify that as well. There are Dati Leumi Yeshivot that the HESDER component is very, very small, like Merkaz Harav, right? So you got to be more specific. HAREDI is not monolithic either, and Dati Leumi is not monolithic. You got to subdivide the groups. But I think that your hashkafa in life has to be that this is a legitimate derech in Klal Yisrael. Whether it is the one that's right for me and my family is an issue I discuss with my rabbis and teachers, but I do not delegitimate someone that has that hashkafa. Yeah.
Before you break down the Arizal writes by Tosefes Shabbos that by he saying by Noam brings Tosefes Shabbos steals from Shabbos.
Brings the what? Brings the into the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And similarly, by Malka brings the kedusha from the Sudas of Shabbos into the whole. Lamaisa, what does it mean to bring the kedusha from Shabbos to the whole, and what is it, I guess?
Yes. So obviously we don't mean the kedusha of Shabbos in the sense of not doing malacha. I mean, I can do malacha once I make Havdalah and Shabbos is over. But the kedusha Shabbos is a closeness to Hashem that you have, and your ability of your neshama to connect to Hashem and feel. So the Arizal is saying that Malava Malka can be mamshich. It brings in the ability to have a closeness to Hashem that you could normally only have on Shabbos, and it still gives you that ability. And that's a great gift. That's a wonderful gift that Hashem gives. There's an old Hasidic minhag that Malava Malka. First of all, if you look at a siddur, you'd be very surprised, or maybe you've seen it. How many zemiros there are for Malava Malka? A lot of them we don't necessarily always know the nigun for, although a lot we do have definite nigunim for, and more than one, just like Shabbos zemiros have more than one. But among Hasidim, it's also customary to tell a lot of maisim at a Malava Malka, stories that are ma'orer yiras Hashem and avas Hashem, and it's a time to kind of connect to the greatness of the past, to the gedolim of the past, and then try to be makasher yourself to them as well.
Why not Malava Malka
Well, they say that that maisim generally, in other words, if the idea of a Malava Malka is to be makasher yourself to Hashem, since Hashem is infinite. Among Hasidus, the concept was a maisa connecting to a human being who's close to Hashem is a way that I get closer to Hashem, because that's something I can relate to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Metzias might be something I'm not able to relate to.
Going back to the Tilumi question, where does one draw the line?
To the what question?
Right.
Did you? Oh, that Tilumi, yeah.
Where does one draw the line with if a Jew does stuff a little bit different than me, has slightly different hashkafas than me, might not be makbid on halacha the way I am, I say that's fine, he has his mahalach. And yet if somebody, and then there's obviously a line where we say, no, that's not okay, that's wrong. At what point do we draw that?
Yeah.
Because we have Jews who aren't makbid to Torah Kriyashma, and we still say that's okay.
Well, okay, okay. I mean, the line that you draw is halacha. Now, a Jew is not makbid on Zman Kriyashma. I don't say that's okay, but I don't judge him as a Russia. I say, I say to myself, it's unfortunate sometimes that people are not as careful as they should be. I'm not saying legitimate it. I'm not saying give it a hechsher, but I will say that there's a tremendous difference between missing Zman Kriyashma and believing that Medinat Yisrael, was given to us by Hashem, and it's a good thing. That's an ideological question, that's a philosophical question, and it's very hard to say that someone's hashkafa is wrong. It's not my hashkafa, but who says I'm right?
Right, I must be particularly in halacha.
In halacha, so the dividing point is halacha. Halacha is the dividing point. But even then, that doesn't mean I'm not going to let my kids go to this play with the kid of this other person because he doesn't always make Zman Kriyashma. You don't have to be that way. The person could be fundamentally a good person, a Baal Midos. There are areas in which he has to be misaken himself, just like there are areas that I or you. Mr. Maybe Zman Kriyashma is not our area of tikkun. We may have other areas of tikkun that might be worse. Lashon Hara, whatever it would be. So I'm not saying I'm okay, you're okay, but I'm saying that we don't have to be mavatal people, even in that situation. Yeah.
this was sent in. Why are there no minyanim later at night on Motzi Shabbos?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've been in that situation sometimes where whatever the reason, I didn't get to daven Ma'ariv on time. So the question is, it's hard to find. I mean, first of all, in Yerushalayim, that actually is not true. You can actually get late minyan. You go to the Kotel and some of the Shtiblach. I would think that the reason why you don't have a late minyan on Motzei Shabbos is because people want to be able to have a Malava Maga. They want to eat at some point. And until you daven Ma'ariv, you don't make Havdalah, and until you make Havdalah, you can't eat, right? So it's inconvenient to have a late minyan. And then you think about it. Why do I need a late minyan Motzei Shabbos? What exactly was I doing? Now, if you're Amshanav, and you're, Hasidic, they keep on going with Shabbos till Sunday morning and maybe Sunday afternoon sometimes. All right, so you'll have a late minyan. But for the average person, what exactly am I doing, Shabbos afternoon that I need a late minyan for, right? So, lehepech, people look for an early minyan, sometimes too early. They look for an early minyan Motzei Shabbos, and not that many people look for a late minyan. But sometimes, if you're having Shalosh Shudas, this is an issue, and Shalosh Shudas is going well, and you're singing and the like, but you don't have a minyan, a late minyan is useful. But Baruch Hashem, in Yerushalayim, you can actually find one. Not so much in America, it's true. In America, you're not going to find late minyanim on Motzei Shabbos. Okay, everybody, take care.